It's me, the Shadow Dash, and I'm gonna be reading, reading the third chapter of Count Derpy. So yeah, let's go. As I looked around the area near Sweet Apple Acres, I saw the moon going down and the sun start to rise. I took one good look at the sun, but then felt burning all over my face. I screamed from the agony, turning away, but seeing my hooves were turning red like a sunburn. I realized this wasn't good. I could die. I turned into a bat, which seemed to stop it from getting worse, but I still felt burned from what I'd already been exposed to. I hurried inside a nearby cave and took refuge in the shadows next to some old brownish pony and animal skulls. Once I settled into a good spot, I turned back into my vampony form and splashed some water on myself from a nearby pool to soothe my burns. With the danger over, I smiled and laid down for a nap. I felt like I could survive a week without needing to eat anything. Applejack hurried with Pinkie in a body bag to Twilight Castle. Soon, a meeting was called with all their friends. Twilight cleared her throat and said, "Thank you, every pony, for coming. You may notice that Pinkie Pie isn't with us." Applejack started shedding some tears. Fluttershy comforted her friend and wrapped her hooves around AJ's neck. She said politely, "It's okay, AJ. Tell us what happened." Applejack began, with tears still falling from her eyes. Yesterday, Pinkie was filling in for Big Mac and Apple Bloom on account of Bloom's trip to Manhattan to see Babs. After we were done for the day, it was getting real late and Pinkie was leaving all excited for tomorrow. And she started absolutely bawling and hugged Fluttershy tightly. Rainbow Dash then asked, "And what happened? Some monster gobbled up Pinkie Pie or what?" Applejack sniffed. It was way worse. And that it was way worse. And that after I went back inside, I heard knocking at my window. I thought you were pranking me, honestly, but then I saw a weird bat coming over, and then for a moment, some pony in the darkness, right there, with wings. I plumb fell over. Applejack, a Rainbow Dash, rolled her eyes. "Fangs? Really? Any cult could have put some fake teeth in. and you just didn't want to admit they scared the horse apples out of y'all. Applejack shouted, "Rainbow!" and zipped her lips with magic. Applejack blushed and continued, well, okay, fine, I'll be honest with y'all. I lost control a bit, but only gas came out. You would have done the same. And this ain't about that. After I got up, then there was something way worse. Applejack started shaking with fear. Rarity piped up, "It's nothing to be ashamed of, darling." Now, what happened after the scare of the fanged pony? Applejack took a deep breath and said, "Thanks, Rares. I saw Pinky's body when I went out to check. I found her throats had been cut. There were 2 marks in her belly from some kind of bite, and almost all her blood was gone." The room went silent for a moment, except for Rainbow trying to speak through the zipper on her mouth. Twilight sighed and unzipped it. Rainbow shouted, "Vampony!" She then cleared her throat and continued, "Sorry about that earlier, AJ. One of my friends got killed by a vampony. I've read all about them in Darren and the Curse of the Crimson Chalice. They drink blood. They turn to bats. They can't go into the sun." Twilight let out a groan and said, Rainbow, Darren might write books about actual events, but we have no way of knowing which parts are true and which parts she made up for the story. There also could be other explanations. We've got plenty of reliable books right in my library to consult, and we got a responsibility to Pinkie Pie and any future victims of whatever this was, to do things right. Twilight gave Rainbow a solemn look. Rainbow grumbled and said, "Fine, but if your books don't turn up anything, Darren are next. We need to be on top of this." Twilight nodded. All right, I'll write to AK a yearling as well, so we can find out what she actually knows about this sort of thing. With luck, there won't be any more victims before we have a solid idea of what we're dealing with. Applejack put on a smile for the first time that day. It sounds like a plan. It would feel darn good to get a revenge on that monster. Fluttershy looked rather nervous as she piped up, or we could just ask it nicely. I mean, what if it didn't mean to? Rarity rolled her eyes and replied, "Darling, something tells me nighttime, like bloodsuckers that intentionally scare the friends of their innocent prey, can't be reasoned with, and I look forward to tearing that thing apart for Pinkie Pie. Twilight nodded and said, "She's right. And now let's get to work." I woke up in my cave, feeling much better, and I took a moment to stretch and realized my burns had all healed, and I figured it must be my vampiric powers that did it so fast. I turned into a bat and flew a bit away to find a stream to serve as a bath, careful to wash up and everything in the shade of a large tree. Once I was done, I turned back into a bat and flew to a blacksmith's shop. I had to be careful turning into my pony form outside, where I couldn't get burned by the sun. I then knocked, and the blacksmith smiled as he gave me the completed axe. I waited until he was looking away to transform back into a bat and fly off. Looking back, I saw him rather confused at where I had gone. I was curious about how Pinky's friends were dealing with things, so I flew near to Twilight's castle, where they would have surely been. After a bit of waiting, I saw them coming out. Applejack had a red bandana around her forehead and some simple lines of war paint on her face, while holding a crossbow with a wooden bolt. I remembered hearing that wooden stakes could kill vampires if driven into the heart, and I figured I would best stay away from her. Next was Rainbow Dash, who had even more war paint on her face, showing her cutie mark, but with the colors of the lightning bolt changed to red, orange, and yellow. She had a belt of garlic around her waist, a thin cross-shaped dagger in a sheath on one side of it. After her came Twilight with Spike on her back, and who seemed fairly normal except for carrying a large spell book that had a warning on the cover that it was only to be used by permission of a princess. It surely had all manner of spells in it that could do horrible things. In her saddlebag was also a wooden stake and some garlic. Next, Rarity came out with a beautiful pink and green sun hat and a small sharp grey and pointy rake, plus a sash full of garlic. Knowing her, she'll probably be a threat by screaming her lungs out the moment she would see my fangs, that she was under attack by a fashion disaster. Finally, a Fluttershy trotted out slowly, wearing a orange and blue football helmet and carrying a satchel too. Applejack stomped her hooves and asked, "Girls, what will we do when we find that monster?" Rainbow Dash yelled, "Throw garlic in his face, then beat the fuck out of it." Twilight huffed and added, Can any pony else? Can only sorry. Can sorry. Can any pony else nearby first? We don't want it to pick us off. One by one. You two. Fluttershy mumbled in a scared tone. And can't we turn the monster to stone? Like we did to Discord? Twilight replied, only if we can subdue it. We don't have the elements, so I would need to cast a spell carefully. I agreed that it's a better way, but we have to put protecting every pony else first, even if the monster didn't want to hurt ponies. I watched as the group split into pairs: Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy, Twilight and Spike, and Rarity and Applejack. I decided to keep hiding, as they would eventually tire themselves out. I went back to my cloud home. A while to check my mail and make sure no pony was snooping around. Once I was assured that no pony had suspected something strange, I snuck into Twilight's Castle's library with my bat form and went through some books on how to fight ponies and pegasi. Soon after, I went into town proper and bought a suppressing horn ring. Lucky for me, the merchant didn't seem to pay much attention to the fact that I wasn't a unicorn, or that I was covering my mouth. Night fell pretty soon after, and I saw Rarity and Applejack heading towards Rarity's house. I chuckled softly, figuring AJ was too spooked to be at her place again. I decided to wait a while longer, hiding as a bat among the leaves that were turning brown. I could take out at least one of these groups once they let their guard down. Well, past midnight, Twilight drank some coffee and her eyes twitched. Rainbow Dash, whose eyes were bloodshot, gave a concerned look and said, "Twilight, that's your 4th cup. You might not be able to fly like that." Twilight said, True, but what else can I do to stay awake?" She leaned into Rainbow Dash's face, pressing their noses together. She then rolled onto the green, grassy ground and started giggling. Like a little filly. Rainbow Dash shrugged her shoulders, yawned, and replied, All right, suit yourself, but I'm going home for a nap, and you should have left when Spike did. With all the blood the van pony sucked, it wouldn't need to feed again unless Pinkie Pie hurt it, and well, I doubt she did, so it probably won't be out tonight. Anyways, if you're here when I get back from my nap, I will drag you to your bed. Rainbow Dash then flapped her wings, struggling to do so, but soon was flying to her cloud mansion. Twilight said, I'll go back soon, and I still have to question that it's a van pony. Darren's books were all about some weird cult that she that she destroyed. The garlic's just a precaution, and it can't hurt to try and blind the creature with it. I flew over Ponyville to see if any of the other groups were still around, and now was the perfect time to strike. With most of the lights out, I had a great meal that night, but I felt thirsty again. Maybe because I healed. I would definitely have to be more careful with sunlight. Finally, I spotted Twilight, who was using her horn as a light source. It looked like she had put away the spellbook in her saddlebag, which could be bad, as maybe it meant like she memorized them. I turned into a vampony form near her and walked up slowly. Twilight turned, looking confused, and said, "Oh miss, a nightmare night is next week." She sounded rather out of it. She then closed her eyes and grinned. Nice costume though." Twilight looked away and seemed to ponder things with her hoof on her chin. I realized I didn't have much time and jumped over her, tackling her. Twilight yelled, "Hey!" I then grabbed the magic suppressing ring I had and placed it on Twilight's horn. She tried to cast something, but it fizzled out. A spark from her horn, turning a piece of her saddlebag to stone. I was glad to see it worked. I would have been a statue otherwise. Twilight struggled to break free and said, well, I guess I'll just have to do things the old-fashioned way then." She tried to shake me off by bucking with her hind legs, but it didn't work. I rolled my eyes and wrapped my hooves around Twilight's neck. I got her on the ground, pinned her down by sitting on her shoulders while stabbing her. She was struggling to shake me off, but without success, as her blood puddling out left her weakened. She said, "I wish my friends were here. Any pwn." I quickly hit her in the mouth to try and make sure she couldn't be heard. Twilight then tried to focus for several seconds and casted the spell again, likely to teleport out, but the magic suppressing ring reduced it to mere sparks. As before, which only succeeded in sending parts of her remain somewhere else. Twilight looked around on the ground, and then shot her hooves. As the wooden stake, which had slipped out of her saddlebag, and out of her saddlebags, she whimpered, "Almost." Twilight rolled over, and now I was on the ground, and she was on top of me, grabbing my stomach. She yelled, "Gotcha!" while pinning me and trying to grab the steak and garlic. I was starting to get scared as my hooves were getting tired and I couldn't push it off. She looked at me and coughed out, "You shouldn't have messed with me," while glaring. She was clearly having trouble with her injuries at this point, and weakly slapped me with a wing as she took hold of the stake. She slammed it down, but it missed my chest. and glanced off one of my hooves. I screamed a bit, and a bit of blood from where I stabbed her stomach I managed to get onto my fangs, giving me strength. I then punched her square, square in the nose, as hard as I could. She fell onto her back, with blood leaking from her nose. She tried to get up, but couldn't move much because of her injury and blood loss. I grabbed my iron axe and said, "A good night, Twilight," and laughed like a mad pony as I raised my axe. Twilight tried to crawl away, but I brought my axe down and chopped her head off. Clean. Her expression was one of terror as her eyes widened and darted around in her final conscious moments. Meanwhile, blood was oozing from her neck, making me feel a sense of overwhelming excitement. I lapped up the blood around as best I could, and sunk my fangs into her belly to inject some anti-coagulants, whatever it means. Soon, the neck fountain had slowed, and I used my axe to open up her chest. Inside, I could see her red, tender heart and her white, cracked ribs. I started licking the blood from the axe and her body, then drank directly from her heart, filling me up. I realized, however, that I couldn't possibly drink all the rest now, due to being already bloated with blood. I thought a bit and realized, like Sweet Apple Acres had jars I could use to store blood for later. A giddy at my what's the word? Realization, sorry. I decided to play around, so I reached into Twilight's belly and grabbed some of her long pink intestines, and then cut them out with my knife and used them as a jump rope. Sorry. As I did so, I looked back at her head. It blinked slowly at me, and her eyes and her face slowly contorted into one of a disgust, with her tongue out. An alicorn's magical nature must be able to keep their several heads alive a while, but it was obviously nearing its limits. I realized there was an opportunity here to pluck her, and I realized there was an opportunity to prank her, and smirked, and then placed her snout right up against her corpse's rear. I giggled like a mad pony as I left the scene. I quickly flew to Sweet Apple Acres and saw Big Mac sleeping with his head in his hooves. He had a stand with a yellow sign that said, "Apple jam for 10 bits. I stole 3 jars of apple jam, opened the lids, and poured the apple jam out. I then slit a Big Mac's throat, making him wake up briefly, only to garble a bit before passing out. I made deep cuts all over his body, along with a bite to make sure the blood wouldn't coagulates, or whatever it means. I then grabbed the jars and tilted them to where the blood was leaking from, and after half an hour and a lot of patience later, two of the jars were filled halfway. I went back to do the same to Twilight's body, hoping that no pony had stumbled onto it in the full moonlight. I liked the moonlight, but it meant ponies could see fairly as well. Hopefully her head was right where I left it, and her eyes weren't moving at all by this point, so I breathed a sigh of relief and got to work turning her over to extract her remaining blood, licking up some that wouldn't get into the jar. However, I heard hoofsteps nearby. Soon, I heard a voice that sounded like Fluttershy and scared say, "Hello." Sorry. "Is any pony there?" Another voice which sounded like Rainbow Dash piped up, "Twilight, that you?" With all this bloating, I knew I couldn't take on both. I quickly walked away from Twilight's body and looked up. I looked at my options. Aha, a blush. A bush, sorry. I hid in it and got into a squatting position. I cleared my throat a bit and said, I'm not Twilight. Just out on a walk, and Fluttershy came a bit closer and said, "Oh, Derpy. Thank goodness. I was worried like there was some monster about." As she trotted ever closer, while what looked to be Rainbow flew a bit to the side. I then started peeing, making sure to force it out. And so shoot here. A little privacy, please. I had to go. Fluttershy gasps and turned her head away. Oh, right, sorry. Why are you out here? A Rainbow Dash striked a giggle, then got jabbed in the side by Fluttershy and added, well, where's Twilight? She was right here. They might be onto me. I thought quickly and shouted, night exercise. I thought a bit more and said, I saw Twilight about an hour ago. She told me there might be a monster, and I looked around for it, but I was just about to head back. She went home for the night. A Fluttershy seemed to buy it as she said, okay, sorry to invade your privacy. I'll be going now. She trotted off hurriedly, and then started to fly with Rainbow Dash not far behind. I finished up and headed over to Twilight. Sorry, the jar was only half full, but maybe it would be enough. I looked over to where the two went and saw them flying back this way. and they must have been pretending to buy my story. I panicked and left the jar, flying back towards my cave. Soon after, I heard a scream. And Fluttershy calling for help. Now every pony knows. Now every pony would know it was me. And yeah, that was chapter 6. I apologize, for the amount of time it took to finish this chapter, but it's longer than chapter 1 and 2. And so yeah, that's why this video is currently 36 minutes. Well, almost 36 minutes. But yeah, that's it really. I'll see you guys next time, and bye.